Today in class we talked about creating histograms. So first let's talk about what is a histogram. Okay, so a histogram is a graphical display where the data is grouped into bins or intervals, and then it's plotted as bars. It's plotted with a horizontal and a vertical axis. So it kind of looks like a bar graph, except a bar graph represents one individual value, so it has spaces between the bars. The histogram represents an interval, so it's a range of numbers, so there's no spaces between your bars. Okay, now when we're organizing the data, this is one of our biggest steps because if you organize your data well, making the histogram is super easy. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to determine the highest and the lowest values, and you're going to figure out whatever the range is. Okay, so you're going to figure out, our spread is this. It ranges from 0 to 50. Then you're going to divide the range into 5 or more sections with an equal number of values in each section, and this is called your bin width. So you're just going to figure out how big of an interval that you're going to have on your histogram. Okay. Then you're going to create a frequency table with the appropriate bins or intervals at the left side, and then you're going to do a frequency on the right, and you're going to do that with tally marks. Okay, now when you're actually creating the display, you're going to draw a horizontal axis and you're going to mark even widths for your bin. Okay, so if it's if you have 2 spaces between each bin, it's got to have 2 spaces all the way through. You're going to label the bins. Okay, so it's clear. You're going to give it a title, so you're going to tell us what it means. You're going to do the same thing on the vertical axis. Okay, choose your scale, equal widths, title your axis. Then you're going to construct bars that are attached to each other, okay, for each class of data, and you're going to make sure to give your histogram a title. Okay, so let's actually look at one. It says, Miss Jackson took a class survey to collect data on how much time students spent on electronic media over the weekend. He collected the following data. So he asked each of his students, he said, how much time did you spend on electronic media? And this is what they responded. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out our intervals and create our frequency chart. So I see that one person spent 0 hours, and the highest number somebody spent was 25 hours. Okay, so we're going to figure out at least 5, and 0 to 25, if we divided it into 5, each interval would have a width of 5. Okay, so 25 divided by 5 gives us a width of 5. So that means that we can count by 5s. So our first interval over here is going to represent 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's 0 to 4. Okay, that represents 5 of our numbers because we have 0, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4 represents 5 of our numbers. And then our next bin is going to pick up right where it left off. Okay, so it's going to be 5 through 9, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, then we have 10 through 14, 15 through 19, 20 through 24, and 25 through 29. Okay, so you figure out your interval width, which in this case it's 5s. So, and then we just counted by 5s. Okay, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, now any of these data points that fall between a 0 and a 4, we're going to put a tally mark. Same thing for the rest of them. Okay, so Jamie had 12 hours, so I'm going to go to between my 10 and 14, and I'm going to put a tally mark. Paul had 8, so that's between 5 and 9. Ben had 20, so that's between 20 and 24. James had 2, so that's between 0 and 2. Phoebe had 3, that's between my 0 and 4. Jason had 16, so that's between 15 and 19. Lisa had 25, so that goes between 25 and 29. Taylor had 24, so that's my 20 to 24. Matt had 0, so that's my 0 to 4 bin. Anna had 17, so that's my 15 to 19. Luke had 11, so that goes between my 10 and 14. And then Sid had 8, so that's between my 5 and 9. Put a tally mark. Okay, so we have our intervals on the left and our frequency on the right. We have our tally chart. Okay, so now we're actually in the creating the display. And again, I'm going to recommend using graph paper so that you can keep everything nice and neat, so that you have lines to follow. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our X and our Y axis. Okay, now on our X axis, that is where we're going to put our intervals. Okay, so our intervals, we skip counted by fives. So I'm going to label my X axis by fives. So I have 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Can't stop there because this interval goes from 25 to 29. So got to go to 30. Okay, I'm going to give it a title. This is my hours. Okay, so this is how many hours the student spent. Now I'm going to label my y-axis. My y-axis has to go up to my highest frequency. So in the frequency, the highest one we have is 3. So I can just count 1, 2, and 3. Okay, got to give it a title 2. This one is our frequency, so that's how often it occurred. Okay, all right, so last but not least, we're going to draw the bars. Okay, so from 0 to 4, so that means it was from 0 to less than 5, we had 3 tally marks, so our bar is going to go up to the 3. Okay, so from 5 to 9, so from more than 5 but less than 10, we had 2. So in between 5 and 10, that's 5 to 9, and that's a 2. Okay, 10 to 14, we had a 2. 15 to 19, so in this one, we had a 2. 20 to 24, we had a 2. And this one, we would have a 1. So this bar, sorry, I accidentally put this bar here. This one should go up to 2, and this one should just be a 1. Okay. Last but not least, we need a title. So we're going to give our histogram a title. And a title is the attribute, or it tells us what it's about. And this graph is about the hours spent on electronic media. Okay, so there's our histogram. So some vocabulary that we need to talk about. Okay, so statistical display shapes. Vocabulary we talked about yesterday when we did the dot plots. An observation is the number of pieces of data that are collected. So on a histogram, the way to calculate the number of observations that are collected is you just add up their frequencies. So this bar has 2, plus 5 is 7, plus 6 is 13, plus 8 is 21, plus another 5 is 26, plus 4 is 30. So we had 30 observations on this histogram. Okay. Now we talked about the spread is the range of the data points. So on this one, we actually don't know the maximum and we don't know the minimum. So our spread is just going to be the range. Okay. Age of the lottery winners ranges from 20 to 29 to 70 to 79. Okay. We don't know the exact maximum and the exact minimum. So our spread is just 20 to 29 all the way to 70 to 79. Okay. And then our attribute, or the feature of this graph, we can find in the title. So the feature of this graph is the age of lottery winners. Okay, now let's talk about our shapes. A symmetric graph, or in this case is a histogram, tells us that most of the data falls towards the center. We can see, and it's got fewer data points on the extremes. We can see that in this histogram, most of our data falls towards the center, and we have a little bit on each extreme. If it is skewed left, most of the data points fall towards the upper extreme. And our upper extreme here is 70, and most of our data is here. Looks like it's got a little tail off to the right. That's why, or off to the left. That's why they called it skewed left. But we need to remember that most of the data falls towards the upper extreme. Okay, skewed right is the exact opposite. Most of the data point falls towards the lower extreme. Okay, so if you look here, most of our data is down towards the 10 and the 20. Okay, we got a little tail to the right. That's why they called it skewed right. We need to remember most of the data falls towards the lower extreme. Okay, uniform means that the data points are exact or they're very similar. Okay, so if we're looking at this one, they all have the exact same number. So it's uniform, it's the same, but it can also mean that they are similar, and that would be uniform as well.